Bueno, bienvenidas
Well,
y bienvenidos a este diálogo de
hello, welcome to this conversation of educating cities. I'm a member of the Latin American delegation for educating cities. We call this From School to the Workplace and wish to exchange and dwell upon good practices, innovative practices that can make a contribution to inclusive educating policies when it comes to making the transition to the world of work. We're going to look at experiences and civic practices and pre-professional innovative practices in the cities of Barcelona, Brussels, the autonomous city of Buenos Aires, and foster exchange between, if you like, teachers. The dialogue has simultaneous interpreting into the three official languages of educating cities. English, French, and Spanish. You will go to the globe icon at the bottom of your Zoom bar, and there you can choose your language. Please make sure that we have your video open, but your microphones closed. First and foremost, we shall welcome and give the floor to Marina Canals, who's the General Secretary of the International Association of Educating Cities, the IAEC. Marina, welcome. Thank you ever so much, Paula. Good morning. Good afternoon to some, good afternoon for others. And thank you ever so much for being with us in this dialogue today, in discussing from the school to the workplace. It's a great pleasure for the International Association for Educating Cities to be part of this proposal of the IAEC delegation in Latin America and have such a highly qualified, if like, public. This last year has been a year full of challenges, The COVID pandemic has led to big and sort of sea changes. The current global crisis has also laid us with further challenges, which have you like worsened the obstacles, the hurdles between the school and world of work, and also made opportunities and training more difficult. So local governments, such as the authority which is closer to the ground, closer to the citizenry, to the citizens should will have to mobilize and take and get involved. We have digitalized learning, and thanks to these big efforts, we can meet from different points of the planet. This pandemic also brought good things. And this online learning process does not replace in-person learning. Learning is a lot more than just going to the school. It's a lot more than just what goes on in the classroom. Learning for educating cities also involves personal welfare, personal well-being of community, personal welfare, personal well-being of communities, the possibilities of social encounters, enjoying the sharing of public space, participation in the arts and cultural life, and also involved in decision taking in our cities, but also to have a place in society, and education are key. So this situation which we are undergoing will lead us to have to take measures. And the Charter, in Article 16, makes it absolutely clear. Educating cities must foster everything to do with coordination between educational planning and the market. It also urges us to ensure that training is free of any sexist racial stereotypes. We want training and education which are just centered on accumulating knowledge, but to have to provide people with opportunities to put to practice their knowledge they have acquired. Everything to do with pre-professional practice is essential in these cities for which we all here work, for our cities. These changes and these situations which have COVID has brought upon us pandemic has brought on us, we are more resilient. But we should not just pat ourselves on the back for that. We have to continue exploring new ways, establishing, setting up new conversations, new dialogue. And we do have an obligation towards more vulnerable sectors of the population. There are challenges ahead vis-a-vis recovery, and this will involve investing in education and bridge building between the professional life and training, two-way bridges, because otherwise these inequalities and these crisis knock-on effects will go far beyond the end of the pandemic, after the end of the virus transmission. These inequalities will be there and will remain there. And therefore, I would invite you to take full advantage and enjoy the conversation with these three cities, which in very different ways, Buenos Aires, Brussels, and Barcelona, will share with us with great generosity. They're going to share their best practices and see how they or the view they take on these bridge building, so the transition is easier and has sterling results. The International Day of Educating Cities this year has the following motto: leave no one behind. And that is why this conversation is more and more important. So welcome the three cities who are going to intervene. Thank you ever so much for your generosity and the time you are freely giving us. Thank you. Thank you ever so much, Marina, for your welcome and kind words. And now we shall hand over to the cities who are going to take pride of place today. And we shall welcome the city of Buenos Aires, Argentina, Eric Oliver and Christian Caruso, who are advisors of the Subsecretariat of Pedagogical Action, and Carola Martinez, who is advisor of the General Office of Educational Planning. And we shall also hand over from Barcelona, Fond, and it's Brussels, Jennifer Zubinage, who is Director General of Public Education, and Alice Rodriguez, who is responsible also in the Division of Public Education. And last but not least, we shall also welcome and give the floor to our moderator today, who is Agustina Olivier. He's coordinator of projects of the public policy implementation of IPEC, from the University of Buenos Aires. And she's carrying out a master's degree in educational policies at a Argentine university. She was also responsible for promoting youth involvement. I'll hand you over to Agustina, and I also wish you a good encounter. Hello, Paola. Thank you ever so much, and my welcome to all of you today. Thank you for this convocation. First and foremost, I'd like to thank IAEC for having invited us to participate in this encounter. We, above all, can see how different local governments in different latitudes, different contexts, are facing up to global challenges such as the pandemic and so on. But they are also different in many ways, and they're different in each place. Today, we'll be learning on how different cities if you like, seeing new strategies to deal with the challenges ahead. As you've been told, the key question is a link between school, the world of work, and other social organizations. The Charter stresses the importance of an overall holistic approach to education. And we need to see the creativity generating, if you like, communities of knowledge with no exclusion. In the CIPEC, we believe that in secondary school, education is key to lay the ground to ensure that young people can contribute to their social skills. Of course, work is key. The work is key. And we need active citizenship, uh, apprenticeship for life, and amongst many other questions. We believe it is necessary, first and foremost, to ensure that these young people are at school, are following education. This is a challenge that in middle developing countries was a big challenge. In 2018, pursuant to the Latin American Development Institute, a high percentage of children were outside schooling. And the there was a big difference in success at school pursuant to the level of education and the level of if you like, the economic status of families. To get kids to school involves urgent actions now. For instance, to have a system, an individual system, which will allow us to know those who are not at school and who are at risk of school failure. And we need specific actions to deal with each individual issue. This includes guaranteeing basic conditions in their family to ensure that they can successfully access the labor market, to look at their family issues, also dealing with, if you like, coexistence and community at school. But as Marina says, education is not just a question of going to school. And this learning process, complex learning process, which are related to strengthening their capacity to, if you like, get a life project off the ground, we need to take a long, hard look at the secondary school. We need to look at concepts. Often we want students just to learn concepts and memorize them and reproduce them. That is not a good model to develop this learning, these complex ones in different fields. And we want to promote the necessary skills. We need to ensure that learning takes place in real contexts, that students have a chance to experiment, to put their acquired knowledge into practice, and to adapt their action based on a reflection to slowly but surely improve their capacity to experiment and to grow personally. And to achieve all that, we need to ensure that there's a proper connection between the school and its environment. And schools are protagonists. They are the ones who are in touch with the organizations in their environment, and they can ensure there is, if you like, contact and they can also obtain resources, materials, and establish institutional links and regulatory frameworks, amongst others. Today, there are three experiences. Erika Oliveira and Cristian Caruso are going to tell us about the secondary education in the future. Nils Pons will talk about the Barcelona Vocational Training Institute, and Jennifer Dubinage and will talk about practice in Brussels together with Alice Rodriguez. We shall be here for about an hour and a half. First, each team will present its experience in 10 minutes. I'll have 10 minutes, and they can tell us their objectives, their purposes, context, institutional framework, and the educational dimension of each practice. And then the three cases will have 5 minutes to answer questions from learning process in each period. And then there'll be a Q&A session from the public. and then a final wrap-up. I'll be handing over the floor and I'll control timings. So I'd like to tell all of you to put your questions in the chat. We shall look at them and recover some of them and choose some of them for the Q&A session. Okay, let's hear from the experiences right away. And now we shall hand over to Erika Oliveira and Christian Caruso, who are responsible from Buenos Aires and also a representative of the Ministry of Education. And they'll talk to us about school in the future. Erika, Carola, Christian, it's over to you.
Hola a todos y a todas. Buenos días, buenas tardes. Como bien decía Agustina, bueno, mi nombre es Carola Martínez.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Carla Martinez. I represent the city of Buenos Aires. And we're going to tell you a little bit about, well, first of all, why we call this future secondary school and deepening secondary school level. Really, what we're talking about, future secondary school started off in Buenos Aires some years ago with things that Agustina had been told us about the transformation of secondary school. All that involved a change which started before 2017 with a change in the design of the curriculum, and it's what we call the NES. It's the future secondary, it's the secondary school framework, deepening the secondary school level, going further in the secondary school level with a whole series of changes inside our teaching practices, in terms of our teaching methods, pedagogy. And this is what we are coming to tell you about today. So what do we call this, the secondary school of the future? Well, as I'm sure you know, the national education law in our country started to define some axes of secondary education that have to do with these experiences that we're going to be telling you about this afternoon. And the three strengths have to do with training for continuity in studies for young people, so that they can really acknowledge themselves as students and develop their potential, all of their potential, to continue on through higher education. That's one of the most important axes or strands. They must have the chance during their secondary school to get closer to the world of work in all of its aspects to the full extent. So each student has internships, on-the-job placements, and sometimes they're not properly prepared for this by their school situation, and therefore they really need tools so that they can start to understand this new world that they're about to enter. And the other strength is enriching their general knowledge as citizens, so that they can live through this experience in which the different environments are different to school. As Marina said right at the start, you need to provide opportunities for them to understand other places, other fora, other spaces, other environments, which are also sources of training and learning, like school, but outside school, using therefore tools and proposals for practices, and that they should really be involved within the school project as a school project in itself. And this allows them also to bring to the fore their civic knowledge, to develop social school skills, because we're working, we're living in a globalized world. And now I'll give the floor to Erika for the next part. Can you hear me okay? Yes, the sound is okay, thank you. Well, we wanted to share with you the structure of our educational system in the city of Buenos Aires. We have 167 schools, state schools, and we've been using this as the platform for this secondary school project. We have 4 directorates: Directorate of Middle School Education, which has the largest number, 104. So we have interference coming from somewhere else. So, as I said, there are 104 schools which have emerged different points in history of Argentina through different processes like the transfer law, the move over to the educational jurisdictions and so on. So that's the middle schools of all sorts, including training schools. Then we have the Directorate of higher schools teaching artistic education. And the characteristic of these bodies is that they are academic units. They are institutions that work in the initial primary, secondary and tertiary level of education. It's cross-cutting, and there's a great deal of coordination between the different levels. And as the name suggests, these are schools which intensify these in different languages, live languages, as we call them. Then we have the Director of Artistic Education. This leads people through different artistic pathways. It could be dance, ceramics, visual arts, theater, music, and so on. These are different pathways that are at this level. And finally, we have the technical schools, technical colleges. Christian will tell us more about that, but the other 3 are 5-year training courses, including the teacher training. This is a 6-year pathway because these are regulated by federal frameworks, and that regulates the technical levels. Let me now say a few words about these 167 schools. There are different 2 specific moments in the first 2 years. That's the basic cycle, or the first cycle, if you like. And the 3 or 4 years, depending on what mode you're talking about, are the specific guidance cycles or the technical schools. Now, as today's meeting has more to do with this a guidance cycle, we're going to focus just on the last few years of secondary school, because that's what links up to the world of work. So what we want to tell you about today is that all of this guidance cycle has 2 main axes that are in orange color on the picture. One is an integrated learning, which strengthens dialogue between the various disciplines and strengthens the message around situations, issues, problems that can emerge, both for the students that are approaching this and indeed for the teachers, the teaching staff that are managing the curriculum. And the other axis has to do with guidance. In the 3rd year, we focus on self-knowledge, decision-making, and really dealing with their concerns. As Agustina said, the importance of knowing where you're going, really. And then they move to the guidance strengthening plan, as we call it. That's the final stage, where they start to focus on building a career path in the different fields of knowledge that they really want to go deeper into. And the final year, and I'll hand over to Christian for this, the focus is on this transition to further education. And that's what we want to speak to next. Thank you. Well, I only have 1 minute. This is a very brief screen of the way technical education is set up in the city of Buenos Aires. We have various different schools. We want to show how in the final year in the technical education, we have some very interesting on-the-job training courses. These are training activities that link curricular contents, professional profiles of the students with the challenges of the socio-productive sector. They can focus on what they've been learning and the professional profile for each and every one of these pathways to train as future technical specialists. They are involved in productive projects. They can be particular projects set up by the school, thinking about innovative technological and technical pathways, or working in simulated company environments too. And I'll hand over for the final presentation using the same criterion that you can see. These are non-technical schools, the ones that Erica told you about. These are experiences on the ground. For these training experiences, they tend to link up to each of the different guidances or orientations of the schools, the non-technical areas. There are 13 of these orientations we've been through, and these very, very quickly. We didn't have much time, but we can go into greater details. These are the 13 school pathways, if you like. And with these experiences that we've just told you about, we'll move very quickly onto the next slide, which talks about how to get closer to specific training activities that can be offered by the schools in a curricular format that helps to bring out the individual interests of these students to really have a specific learning pathway, and in line with the content and the practice that they want to carry out, the job placements and internships, but they can also be practiced and carried out in different formats that are mentioned in this kind of process: inquiry, reflection, research, production, social community work, linking up relevant examples in the field and institutions outside the school, among others, with this outside school focus also existing. So that's what we do in the last year. And we start to develop them from once they get their orientation towards their pathway. This experience brings them closer to the world of work. And there are various experiences that we can tell you about. We can go into these in greater detail when we go into technical discussions. But I just wanted to mention one. Students at a school that has an artistic pathway, they help to develop a cultural project in a center, a cultural center, a museum, or something like that. And that's a real hands-on experience for them. They can share that experience. There can be others related to sciences, or students, for example, that have an orientation towards natural sciences. And I'll be rounding off now. Yes, thank you. A laboratory or a research center, something linked to chemical laboratories, where they work with chemical, and so on and so forth. There are so many different potential link-ups. And just as a final comment, these are very enriching experiences for the students, and they really motivate them to continue their studies and very often to move on to work in this kind of places. And let's move on to the final slide, and then we'll round off. Erica, can we just have the last slide? Well, I think we can talk about that when we come to the questions and answers. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you. Well, I'm sure we'll be able to pull this up again when we come back to the questions and answers. Thank you very much indeed. Now, let's move on to Neus Pons, who is the director and the manager of the Professional Vocational Training Center from the City Hall of Barcelona. Good afternoon. Thank you. Can you hear me okay? Loud and clear, thank you. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank for taking part in this and inviting us to take part, and to say that, in fact, the good practice, the best practice we want to highlight involves the involvement of Barcelona City Hall and its metropolitan area in really driving vocational training. People are sometimes very surprised and they say, but wait a minute, you're not a teaching center, and city councils don't have competencies for that, don't have competence maybe, but we do have experience. Right from 1990 onwards, when we had the first city of educating cities that this association was involved in, we started to think about the differential value of vocational training as a source of work, employment, and focusing on youth employment. You know that we have very, very high unemployment, youth unemployment levels here in Spain. Looking at vocational training and also looking at inclusion, equity, gender, all these cross-cutting variables. So an observatory we've always kept up to date so that we don't miss any of these important factors, because these are the sectors that have been most affected in recent years. So Barcelona City Council started to focus on vocational training around 1994. That was when this, I segregated this or hived it off the main educational efforts of the City Council. Well, it's a council for vocational training that was hived off as an association, and all the stakeholders involved in training are debating, sitting around the same table. We talk about training centers, whether they're private, public, semi-private, the trade unions, the representatives, the social partners, the whole fabric, because we feel that vocational training, if it's going to lead to jobs, for initial jobs, when we're unemployed, we need to start and get back into the world of work. We all need this work environment. Now that has worked very well, and we started to work on international issues, and we saw that one way of making people more employable throughout life involved this focusing on this international aspect. So in 1999, Barcelona City Council set up the European framework of vocational training colleges with criteria that we can talk about when we get to the more technical part of this meeting. Now, seeing that all of this mechanism worked well, plus we had all these innovation projects coming on stream, for example, simulated companies, innovation companies, that can be resolved by these different teaching centers. We saw that it was very complex for the City Council to organize all that. In 2007, we decided to set up the foundation. So we have 15 years experience of the foundation and nearly 30 years experience in vocational training. In fact, in 2012, City Hall made a sort of government measure and passed a government measure to be able to cover vocational training under this. So what is the foundation? What's it about? It's a tool that's been mentioned before, a tool. We observe this, this bridge that we're about to show you, the world of work, the job market, and the bridges that are open to planning for education. And this bridge, it's a very small print, but anyway, it's a print of a bridge that obviously joins both sides of the river. Our responsibility is to make sure that this bridge is always up to date, keeping up with the trends, the sectorial discussion tables, for example, sectoral have used the industrial profiles, things that are not covered, that people can't fill those posts because people are not training for that. It's very hard to get girls to sign up for these technical studies and so on. And this gradually evolves, and some are removed and some are added within the box.
Dos partes, dos
Okay,
piezas.
two elements I'd like to one, a perspective, and one which would be actually insertion in the work of world. Well, perspective, looking towards the future. As I said, we are not a entity, a school. We are a tool, intermediate tool between, if you like, school and the world of work. What really helps educational planning? Well, to be clear in what sectors training is necessary. We have a observatory of vocational training, and we work in different sectors, but we do not carry out a study which is there to be shelved. No, it is a study which wishes to have a real impact. How? Well, we work with each sector. And we start off with the Port of Barcelona Authority, which for a long time have been saying there were no professionals to work in the harbor activities. It's a city in itself, the Port of Barcelona. And all professional profiles work there, and they had to bring people from outside. So together with the Port of Barcelona Authority, we designed all their professional profiles. We looked at the professional profiles, and together with them, and then we started working within the nautical vocational training studies and other entities, and we started building up the jigsaw puzzle. And that has been quite a success story, which you have talked about at an international level. Logistics, the same thing happened. It's definitely a sector with many challenges, but we have a lot more information now on how the logistic sector has evolved after COVID, how purchasing tendencies have changed, what warehouses are like. And this does affect a series of professional profiles which were highly industrialized, but we are working on the circular economy and everything to do with sustainable mobility. We are working in projects on hydrogen, how all of this will have an impact on vocational training. And this would be our framework, which really, if you like, is pushing people towards the other side. And then looking at providing a fillip, well, there are certain points I wish to highlight and deal with them in the second part of my presentation. Dual vocational training and international mobility. Well, we know that when people study vocational training, they do it in a dual format. Now, that doesn't mean just sort of on-the-job training, but part of the if you like, syllabus takes place in the company. And there's up to 70% insertion in the workplace. And the City Council of Barcelona in 2012 set up its whole planning for vocational training. And they attach great importance to dual vocational training. And the City Council of Barcelona is basically the one that saw the inception of this, because it's primary schools will, from then on, 80 to 100 persons carried out a dual practice in those schools. And then the whole city council came on board. That means services, complementary institutions, all the various bodies and sections and divisions of the city councils, means that almost 1,000 people, and we've invested 4 to 5 million euros. We have a great importance at dual vocational training, but we also work, if you like, not just in-house, but outward. We wish people to be in touch with the productive system, so that all these sectors we have analyzed should, if you like, be as attached to dual vocational training as we are. Now, international mobility, if someone who's carried out dual vocational training and has been abroad, well, they will have much greater chances of ensuring a lifelong employment. And it's not just a question who knows English will be able to go enjoy international mobility. We want, and from the City Council, what we wish to do by this city network of cities is to create far more inclusive practices. We have pilot plans in mobility. We have fostered mobility at the middle level of vocational training. There are a series of grants and subsidies, and we wish to ensure that all the pieces, the jigsaw puzzle pieces of the puzzle, as you can see in the bridge, are there. We work with Barcelona Activa in the metropolitan area of Barcelona, and our foundation is an example of a bridge and always wishes to ensure that the political side is there. Both I'd like to, in the second half, I'll explain, dwell upon certain other aspects. Thank you. No, thank you ever so much. Well, remember that you can put your questions on the chat, and we can deal with them in the third, if you like, section. Now let me hand the floor to Juliette Jubinat and from Brussels, who can tell us about their civic internships in Brussels. Remember, you can access simultaneous interpreting in English, French, or Spanish. Good morning. Can you hear me well? Can you hear me well? Great. Well, as my colleague Alice Rodriguez and I would like to thank you for the organization. We are delighted to have this opportunity to hear about Buenos Aires and Barcelona, and we'd like to share with you some of our projects, the Civic Internships. Let me kick off by talking to you about the city of Brussels. The city of Brussels is the biggest borough of the Brussels capital region. There are 19 boroughs. Here you can see more or less the limits of our borough, which is 32 square kilometers. That's the one in pink. And compare that to Buenos Aires and Barcelona. The city of Brussels does have powers to, if I organize education, which has to do with primary, secondary, and higher education, and social promotion education, vocational training. We are talking of 5,000 teachers and the staff in 16 libraries, social medical centers. So we're talking of more than 100 institutions and a budget which hovers around 30 million euros. Well, what is our projects? They have a clear target. We wish to prepare all students to be responsible citizens who can get fully involved in a democratic city, democratic society with which is full of solidarity. Now, we believe that mobility as a citizenship starts at school. There are many initiatives which aim to strengthen education of our students, and this is the case for when it comes to setting up the Civic Internship. And I'm going to talk to you about that. These Civic Internships basically follow the motto, we are not born citizens, we become one. How do you become a citizen? Well, meeting people, meeting cultures, meeting sectors of society. And through this diversity, we foster our students, our pupils, to enjoy the wealth, the richness of a diversity. Let me hand over to Alice, my colleague Alice, who will talk to you about the Civic Internship in more detail. Thank you very much. I believe that this is very, very interesting presentation. And I really enjoyed the previous presentations from Buenos Aires and Barcelona. And the Civic Internship comes on stream, if like just before the education level discussed from Barcelona and Buenos Aires. We wish to foster in the students, well, talking about their identity, who am I, what do I want, and where is my place in society. And it helps people to launch the pupils into the world of work. Like Buenos Aires, the project aims at 5th grade pupils. And the idea is that the project helps to sustain a general cultural atmosphere and allowing to develop competencies and skills outside of the school and outside of school hours. And this is, I think there's a close linkage between what we are doing and what we've just heard from Buenos Aires and Barcelona. So they have to do 30 flexible hours, unpaid, and it's compulsory. It's mandatory. They do it amongst our there's supervision of citizenship. There's no professionalization, and unlike other initiatives, these civic internships are not professional, and it is not one of observation. Students are active, must be active, and it's carried out by students, whatever their educational background is. They come from schools, from general education, from technical training, from vocational training, or from artistic education. And it is validated, and it wishes to foster critical approach by the student to his experience. A number of points on that. The project was developed so the management, the management of schools, like the direction of schools with education inspection, and started developing projects. We also work closely with our partners from the third sector, and also from public bodies. There are different stages. There is an individual involvement and a collective involvement, both within school and outside school. Within school, you have, if you like, philosophical workshops and education for citizenship, and the philosophy workshops are aimed at that end. So gradually, the project has grown. It was a pilot project, and now we are in 9 schools with secondary schools, more than 600 pupils, and they follow a very varied educational stream. Vocational training, artistic education. You should also know that these students come from different backgrounds in the borough, and they come from disadvantaged backgrounds and low-income families. This is very important for the success of the project. Amongst our partnerships, well, we choose partners who reflect the values which we attempt to instill into our students. They respect neutrality, and they foster values such as neutrality, equality, diversity, social justice, and so on. We work with hospitals, with shelters, old people's homes, bodies such as Amnesty International, homeless centers, and so on. It's difficult to show videos and witnesses borne by students, but I'll give you some photographs. Here you have one of our pupils who is an advanced mathematical student and spent a week within a center for people with like visual disabilities. And they were they were working with kids, even if that doesn't mean that they will work in that sector in the future. And these photographs, I think, bear witness to how they enjoy the time. Then we had students in the technical and professional time, and on Wednesday afternoons, they were involved in sports activities at a primary school. There you can see our pupil. And then there are, if you like, do-it-yourself workshops. There was another student who every weekend helped out in hospitals here, a pupil or student who spent one week feeding people in marginal backgrounds, very disadvantaged backgrounds. Anyway, another one in all people's home. So, now, interest for the partners. I'll talk about that if someone asks me about that. And that's changed as the project advanced. And this internship, which takes place within schools, does allow students to discover material discoveries, and that is similar to what happens in Barcelona and Buenos Aires. The students had to find out where they're going to carry their internship and complete a form, and they have to explain why they want to do what they've chosen, justify it, and prepare all that. And that does help them for the next stages in their future life at work. And it allows them to discover an active aspect of the city of Brussels. It gets them out of their comfort zone, and it does force them to see that there are other institutions, that there are associations, and the linkage between citizens. Why is it important to have sort of non-remunerated internships? What is the role of a borough vis-a-vis its inhabitants and its citizens? So students have to develop new ways of thinking, capacity for arguing. So, and they have to physically leave the school, go out of their immediate neighborhood. For some of them, a study was carried out in Brussels, which bears that out. A study which said that families from very, if you like, low-income families and, if you like, destructured families had problems leaving their neighborhood. And this forces the kids out to go out and about to discover other neighborhoods and relate to them, and will help them in their future activity in the world of work. Thank you ever so much to the three teams. The three experiences are extremely interesting, I should say. And now we can dwell upon them a bit more. Now, first and foremost, I'd like to encourage you to put your questions on the chat, and we have 3 questions for the various speakers. So you have several years of experience. I'd like to know from implementation, what lessons have you learned from the experience? What lessons have you learned which are perhaps different from what you imagined might happen in your initial planning stage? Did you have to tweak it, correct it? And then what, if you like, strong points you have found? So please answer in 5 minutes. Let's start off with Buenos Aires, then Barcelona, and then Brussels. So I'll hand over to Buenos Aires.
Okay, well, I can just perhaps talk about the organizational side of things, and what helped us to learn was looking at the legal aspects, how we can ensure these areas where these youths can feel safe enough to transit to this new part of their lives area, so that they can have the richest experience possible. we generated a system in which they had to present the centers had to present the documents and see that everything was above board. And we tried to help to cut through the red tape to make the administrative steps a little easier for them. By channeling it through us, we managed to have the possibility to offer activities outside the school gates, outside the school limits. I don't know whether my colleagues would like to pick up on other aspects here. Yes, let me just add to what Chris has said. These experiences involve the students and help them to develop many other skills that you don't normally see in schools, allowing them to share cooperative experiences with a team, go somewhere that they're unfamiliar with outside school, and exchange with the adult world, the world of work, the sort of the wage earning world. And this has enormous potential really to help them to spread their wings, to develop all sorts of life skills that you don't necessarily associate with school training. And this is really what we're aiming for. This is what we're trying to achieve. And this was a big part of the experience. The young people who are transitioning to this adult world really are taking on board their learning pathway very much. They're taking it on as their own. And that's what the training scope really does. Because, you know, one thing is just getting a kid into a company so they can get some work experience. That's a long way from everything we're trying to do. We're trying to generate expectations. We're trying to generate a movement so that they can become keen, so they can become involved, or indeed to awaken their civic awareness. All of these are very enriching, and they also strengthen what they have chosen to do. Yes, and another learning experience is really to strengthen and to bolster the projects that the school had already implanted. And we as the ministry see that it's very important to capitalize on what the schools have already done. They have planted the seed, so to speak. We help them to really make those projects grow, to help insert all of this into their local setting, to help to strengthen these links and these activities that the schools can outline. And also another learning path is understanding all this diversity of issues. You know, if we look at what Barcelona is doing in terms of professional and vocational training, what others are doing in terms of civic training, and our idea to build this bridge that links between school and the world of work as they go on to further education, to higher education, to university perhaps, and to build that bridge. Thank you. Perhaps I could just add something in the very few seconds I've got left. This is a real challenge and an interesting one for schools. And of course, this generates very significant learning experiences as we've seen certainly in terms of what we've done in the last few years in secondary schools. But it also involves working very closely with the teaching staff. And this is no small matter because there's a cultural change, there's a paradigm change. And look at really the horizon of secondary schools. And if we look at the lessons learned, we were able to identify a few, basically deepening the experience of secondary school from year 1 to year 5. And it has to do with teams that really help to accompany this whole process step by step all the way through. And these are the people who are present here today, really providing capacity building and really taking these people by the hand, so to speak, accompanying them all the way through the process, working on the artistic, the normal approach, the technical schools and so on. that is really tailor-made to what they need. And when you look at all the different schools, they offer so many different things. It's very important that we can push forward a project with a sort of common thrust, even though they're all so different. But it's very much a tailor-made approach. And that's why it's important. You mentioned, Agustin, about planning. Sometimes you have a plan, you have an idea in your head or on paper, but when you get to the real situation, you have to be able to adapt that to the characteristics and the history of each and every school and invite them and to draw them in so that they can bring about new institutional and paradigm changes in the city. Thank you. Thank you very much. That's very interesting. Nels, would you like to tell us about the experience of the Barcelona Foundation now? Thank you. Well, the first thing that we learned that I'd like to share with you is we want to see how this vocational training is really developing and consolidating in the metropolitan area of Barcelona. Over the years, we've had political changes, changes in the political stripes of the people running the city hall, but none of this has led to these projects falling by the wayside. Nobody has tried to close things down or shut down these projects. It's very complex to build things up. And of course, if they get cut back, then it's very difficult to rebuild them. And this is a real recommendation when we really bet on this kind of symbiosis with the economic and social system. That means that really we accept that we're moving towards a more collaborative system between the private and the public sectors. Not everybody sees things in the same way or at the same times, but it's a recommendation that we have recommended or applied to ourselves, that you need to have this cooperation, this collaboration, and that is a win-win. It's good for us, it's good for the people receiving this. In our foundation, that was a huge leap forward when in 2018, it was decided to add all of the metropolitan area of Barcelona. That's 36 municipalities altogether. If you visited Barcelona, you know that cities like Hospitalet, which is the second biggest city in Catalonia, is actually stuck on. You drive down the same street and you leave one city, you enter the next one. So this is a very seamless metropolitan area we have. So all of the vocational training courses are developed for the entire metropolitan area, the Greater Barcelona area. So we don't have a break between the city. 25–30% of the population of this project lives in Barcelona. All the rest live in the rest of the Greater Barcelona area. Also, we're very lucky to have the Education Consortium of Barcelona. That's a very peculiar body because it has the local body, but it also has the regional government on board, and Barcelona Activa, which is the city hall's sort of business incubator, if you like. And we try to replicate what we do in the Catalan regional government and the municipalities. Furthermore, for cities in general, we need to keep insisting on the fact that even if you don't have powers to plan for vocational training, but you do have a territorial power because the local level is the closest to the territory. So from a planning level, if you want to really help to train people for the world of work, it's much easier to come through to that at the local level, at the local government level. That means city councils, town councils. And it's more necessary than ever to do that. In fact, the councils for vocational training in different cities cover about 80% of all the vocational training offer through county councils, associations of municipalities with their councils when they're smaller, which means that we're working always on a territorial approach. And perhaps the hardest part of all this is what I said at the start. When you're working with universities, say universities and the world of work go in parallel and they never meet. well, we have the same kind of model that we can see in vocational training. But the way we do things, they have to converge because you've already got one foot in the world of work. But what's hardest to build is that, but it's most gratifying. You said something very important in terms of teachers, the teaching staff. What we try with the companies that are part of our councils, that they work hand in hand with the teachers. So if we're doing 3D printing, for example, teachers need to be able to work for a time in companies where they do 3D printing to actually link up to the actual practitioners. And that's vital because if you look at the way this links together, you need somebody to tutor them from the teaching center and from the company, and they have to coordinate, and they come from different worlds. So all the actions that can be done, which are the most complicated ones in this case, which is letting yourself be helped by others, these are the ones that give the best results, and they're the ones that get the best feedback from everybody. They say they're the most gratifying. Thank you, Nels. And now we'll give the floor to Alisa and Jennifer. They'd like to tell us about your learning experiences in 5 minutes, please. Thank you. Well, the advantage of coming third is that you can link up to what's been said by previous speakers. So thank you very much to the cities of Barcelona and Buenos Aires, because I can come back to a lot of things you've said. As you said in Buenos Aires, our project is very much the same thing, finding similarities and what we're trying to do, depending on the kind of school that it's going to take place, the teaching teams will modify, will adapt this program to make it as effective as possible for their particular school. Also, I said it concerns general education centers, but also technical and professional vocational bodies. The idea is to tailor make these so that they can help as many students as possible. And now, to link up to what Barcelona has said, the same thing happens with us. These civic internships are a municipal-based project. They come from the municipality. So it's not an obligation on our part. There's a political choice or a policy choice. And that goes forward despite changes in governments. And that's important because there is a real will to make schools, to give them a social and cultural role, which goes above and beyond just giving, teaching lessons or teaching different subject matters. And that's a very strong link. Another thing I wanted to say is that we also organize professional skill internships so that people can understand and can learn a trade, just like Buenos Aires and Barcelona, but these training courses come after these civic internships. So it's important to develop these first. And the third point I wanted to mention, and that's not been mentioned by the two previous speakers, and I think that's something that's more specific to the civic internships. As this happens before a professional training course, the idea is to think about your professional knowledge. Some people change, they finish their civic internship and they decide to go off and specialize in something else because they've discovered something while they were doing this first course and they hadn't known about these skills before. And they receive a certificate at the end. And that goes on their CV. And a lot of students have said that that was a way to get a student job. Also, students who are from less well-off backgrounds, to have a student job, even in secondary education, was very useful for them. And that helps them to open those doors. Others were also, after they finished their placement, they were directly employed by the company after secondary school. It also allows them to foster these links between civic work, the schools and the associational bodies. We have a lot of projects that have been born, arisen between schools, between Amnesty, for example, and a specific school, because the link was built by the students with these associations. Thank you.
Muchísimas gracias, Alice.
Thank you very much indeed, Alice. Well, in fact, time is running out a little bit. We do have some questions from the audience. We need to be very, very brief. We're going to have lots of chances to carry on talking to you. For Buenos Aires, a question. What kind of accompaniment is given by the ministry to the schools? Erika and Christian have mentioned something about this, teacher training and teacher follow-up and building and strengthening links. Perhaps you could just field this in 2 minutes. I know 2 minutes is very brief. That's all I can offer you, I'm afraid. Okay, go ahead, Erika. Let me say very briefly, as we said, there are 4 different directorates, but in each directorate there is a team that does monitoring and follow-up of the implementation. There are different instances. Once the schools know that they're going to incorporate this deepening of the secondary school system, there's a whole induction, awareness raising, onboarding, and from a teaching point of view, but from an administrative point of view, they need to know all about the bureaucracy. And then when we've organized the most structural part of this to implement, we have the different teams that accompany the implementation in each school. They meet with the teaching teams, they look at the different skill needs in each school, so that they link together to make sure that this skill building can be done. They also look at the evaluation and sort of fine-tuning of these programs. This is done on a school-by-school basis at the closest possible level possible to the schools, not from a totally centralized level. And what we said about these professional skill building projects, we have a specific team that goes with each and every one of the schools that helps to build this link, this bridge between the professional entities and the schools, and accompanies each and every one of them. Yes, let me just add, Chris, that each school also has a kind of anchor person who is the person that they will link up to for all their dealings with the ministry. Very interesting, thank you. Barcelona, there was a couple of questions. What are these agreements for European exchanges, and how is dual education carried out and training? 2 minutes again. Well, in the cities that are part of the European cities for vocational training, we have a series of agreements which are covered by an ISO standard. I think we're the only network that has an ISO standard underlying it. We have community managers, and we have mobility from one city to another, always using the same hosting criteria. During COVID, of course, there wasn't very much mobility. We nonetheless sent people into companies for placements and internships as part of their mobility, a dual mobility, but also because we knew that when these people are in these cities, they do have a sort of contact person, and they could feel very much at home, someone with international experience. And the good thing about the network is that we do this together as well with other projects that we can prepare for, international projects in the same emerging sectors that we mentioned. When we see there's a sector and we see that it's emerging for one of the areas that we work in, we present that jointly with these kind of projects. And we do that as I say, hand in hand with these different cities and the different policy groups, and they're very much accustomed to working together. And that's an excellent thing, because if you look at the foundation, the international body, there's only 5 people, but these 5 people can't handle everything that's going on. But it's as if you had an extra person in each city. And you were saying, how is the dual part regulated? Well, in these dual placements or internships, part of the educational approaches are given directly by the company. In Spain, if you've been following, this has gone through the Council of Ministers to have a new law on vocational training, and there are going to be changes on the horizon. I think positive changes because this is going well, and I think it's going to be extended to the entire system. Up to now, we've been really pushing this from the foundation. We see vocational training as something integrated, initial, most sort of job-based, and then the ongoing vocational training, and they run in parallel. A certificate of professional training, which allows you to work, but it didn't have an academic value. Now they are going to be valid for that. And that's going to be applicable to occupational training. Up until now, for a 2-year further education course, people are actually doing their placement in the company. They're not in the school. That's very positive. And now we'll have to see, give more dedication to that from the new law, and that will give greater possibilities.
Great. Last question. Yes, I think there'll be many questions of the presentations, and there'll be opportunities to continue sharing and if like delving deeper into this. Last question on Brussels, which has to do, how do you evaluate and, if you like, provide accreditation for these practices? And again, a specific question on the teachers of philosophy that students follow outside school hours. So a brief answer, please. Thank you ever so much. This question is a very interesting question. Now, when it comes to evaluation, what we're going to do that, first of all, if they've carried out, but it's not so much that we assume they do take it. That's a given. But we do, what is important is, if like a reflection, an inner reflection based on their experiences. That's the basis of the project. So citizenship, commitment, and solidarity. We ask them to carry out a philosophical reflection on that. And of course, we'll help them during that so that they can develop these concepts, because it is essential that these concepts be developed not just within the classroom, but outside in a real life situation. This would be pointless unless there was, if you like, hands-on experience in the field, so to speak. And there is if you like, some artistic creation, video creation, or if you like, an oral expose, and the jury is a series of teachers from cross-cutting disciplines, maths, history, and so on. And the teachers discover what their students are like outside a classroom situation. The second question is also very interesting. Does the follow-up take place? Well, there, and the problem of the municipality, we cannot ask our teachers to work outside their teaching hours. That's not really possible. So teachers are not going to go to the place where the civic internships take place, but the administration, the municipal officials will be responsible for the sort of framing this or following up. And if something goes wrong, they will step in and they'll act as intermediaries between the schools and the partners. So there, and of course, there will be activities during school holidays, and you can't ask the teachers to be present and available then. So that's basically it. Thank you ever so much. I'd like to thank the three teams, because I certainly have learned a lot in this hour and a half, and I really would like to learn more. And a final few thoughts has to do how each experience is very different, very distinct. Buenos Aires, Brussels, this has certain comments. Barcelona has more lifelong learning, lifelong training. The dimension of each experiences is different. And in Brussels, there are 9 schools, which aim to be 16. In Barcelona, they don't have operational centers, but they are articulate with different centers. But they all have this idea of offering experiences, learning experiences, which are linked to the context, not to moving out of the classroom. That is a common strand. They want to generate these bridges with the world of work, with the world of associations, and with other with pressing needs of members of the community and of society. And that, I think, is a common strand, and that is certainly enshrined in our charter, the charter of the IAEC. And there's a reflection on how we can learn from these experiences. It's not just a question of copying, pasting different experiences, but it's a question of, say, ask searching questions and say, hey, I hadn't thought of that, and inspire from what you've learned, and generate sort of practice communities in a cross-cutting way amongst the different cities of IAEC to have a more sort of like across-the-board learning. Anyway, let me hand back to my colleague to say a few closing words. Thank you ever so much, Paula, all of you, the teams of the 3 cities who have shared these experiences, which have given a lot of food for thought, a wealth of experiences. Thank you, Agustina, for having moderated this encounter. Thank you for your reflections, your thoughts. From the delegation, I'd like to thank you all for your presence and your participation and contributions. And I would urge you, encourage you to continue working. It's not just a question of copying experience from others, but we can learn from each other. I'd like me to hand over to Marina to bring the encounter to a formal close. Well, so much, I think these 3 cities deserve a big round of applause for their work from all of us, for their sterling work, and they are cities which have been working to leave no one behind, in particular young people. They are cities which have shown us how they build bridges, build opportunities, each of them with different levels or different competencies and different remits. But the common aspiration is to create cities which are better for all through education. There is hope in their endeavor. There is an awareness that there are many young people who have aspirations and dreams, and we should not just wait till the end of compulsory education to think, hey, what are opportunities? What kind of city do we want? No, we want to have cities which anticipate, which are one step ahead, which establish a conversation with the productive fabric of society, with associations. So we don't just train people for jobs which are no longer existing or will no longer exist. But no, we need to stay abreast of development. In the city of Brussels, we are seeing these links which are created with associations and NGOs, cities which create opportunities, which take us out of our comfort zone, compel us to discover other parts of the city. They offer us professional practice even before our final formal training. They open up our minds to new ways of acquiring knowledge, and they above all, they generate spaces of hands-on practice, such as the case of Barcelona. And in Buenos Aires, such a huge city with so many challenges and so many opportunities, it's fantastic to see how this professional practice are closely linked to areas of training, which are the ones of the students. Having said all that, we would like to thank you and pay homage and tribute to all of you. We shall share your presentations with your permission. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for revitalizing these this common conversation. Thank you all. Thank you very so much. Thank you so much. See you soon.